Welcome to our podcast, Shockers Learning Out Loud, where we talk about the fear, the excitement, the setbacks, and most importantly, the accomplishments that come along with being an adult learner.
That was your host, Dr. Pamela O'Neill, and I'm your co-host, Dr. Amber Anderson. And we are the Office of Online and Adult Learning. Although our department merged happened recently, Pam and I have been having fun collaborating for years. We have one goal at WSU, and that's to advocate for our online and adult learners. Our adult learners are working full-time jobs, caretaking for a family member, raising a family themselves, and involved in the community. So, needless to say, their time is limited. And we know that, and we feel you guys. Our office wants to advocate for your success. So, stay tuned for the voices of your adult learning peers as we unpack funny fails, inspiring wins, and mostly the adult learning experience.
One of the things that you and I have talked about before is how adult learners differ, in our daily discussions, but yet there are some similar characteristics, although that's not a homogeneous population. I know a lot of our adult learners are working. They are taking care of kids and their parents. What are some of the other characteristics you would say?
Well, I would think that your students kind of come on campus more than mine would, actually. Yes. Your students are, 24 and up?
24 and older, earning a bachelor's degree, yes.
Okay. Our students are enrolled in online programs, so oftentimes they're never on campus. So my students look a little bit different, but for the most part, they're all adult learners. So right. That means that our students are working full-time, they're involved in the community, they're raising families, they're often taking classes with their teenagers, they're caretaking for their parents, and et cetera, et cetera. So they don't have any extra time, but they do want to finish their degree.
And that's a lot like myself. When you were talking about these students, and I worked full-time. And
I did too.
Yeah, we both did. But you were more of the traditional age, is that right?
Yeah, I think I started about 22-ish.
Okay, yeah. And I was 31 when I started. And so a little bit of difference there in age. But like you, I would come to campus, take my class, do the classes, and then go back to work. And so I think you had a similar experience, yeah?
I did, and I was a first-generation student, so are you, right?
Yes.
So we didn't have, I certainly didn't have any family members or friends or peers that I grew up with in a low-income area of Wichita. I didn't have anybody to kind of teach me what online credit hours were, how to do higher education. So
before we go any further, sorry I didn't want to interrupt you there.
Please do.
First, can you kind of give a definition, or what is our definition here at Wichita State?
I believe first generation is any undergrad student who is pursuing their degree, who their moms or their parents and grandparents have not graduated with
a 4-year degree. That's what I understand as well. So
correct.
Yeah, that's what, in case you didn't know, like myself, I didn't know what a first-gen student was when I started.
No.
And I didn't know that I was one. But there I was being this adult learner, and at that time, we were, I think we were called non-traditional students, but
I believe
today's, the term most frequently used is adult learner for those 24 and older getting their degree. So, you talked about, you grew up on the south side, right?
I did.
Yeah, and mine's a little bit different. I grew up on a farm and had, a big family, and loved that I was able to, live that kind of life. But that also means that, coming to Wichita State, I was, even the biggest town next to, or that we were from basically, was a population of 1,300 people. Mm-hmm. So when I come to Wichita State, it's like huge, man. This is a big town, even in a big town. And so that was a little bit of a shock to me. And I know you've talked about some of the shocks or the things that you've kind of went, oh my goodness, this is totally different. So can you talk about those for a little bit?
I had a little bit of a culture shock as well. I wasn't really on a farm or a rural area, but I did live on a low income side of Wichita. And so since I was a middle schooler, high schooler, we were somehow part of a higher income community, and we got bused to a very expensive high school with more affluent, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So my reasoning for continuing my education and going into higher education is because I critically just wanted to be secure, have a paycheck. Often my parents were experiencing high stress situations where they couldn't pay the bills.
So not even really living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of
Coming from
in
like
that
an
way,
emergency type of environment. So
Right.
my goal was initially to have my own independence, be able to help my parents with the quality of life. So I kind of came out of a kind of a panicky type of start.
Right. And I think mine is a little bit different in that it wasn't so much panicky, but knowing, like you, that a lot of people here at Wichita State didn't come from the same situation I did. And I felt out of place for a while. I will admit that. But for me, I worked for a printing company for 13 years. And when I went to grade school, I know they used to hound us that, if you're not using your talents, that's a sin. And I kind of grew up with that mentality. And I knew that when I was working at this printing company, I was doing small deliveries and just the day-to-day binding aspects or whatever you're doing in the printing company, right? And so I was like, well, I was always a good writer. I love to write. It's something that I wanted to do. And so I I can tell you the exact moment. I was driving down Kellogg and I'm like, there has to be more than this. and right after I got off work, then I went to Central and West at the time, or I think or Central and Ridge here in Wichita. And I walked into the front door of what was
The West Campus,
The West
wasn't it?
Campus,
Okay.
yes. And I said, I think I want to take some classes. And they said, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I want to be a writer. I knew, and I wanted to write for a newspaper. But I don't think, as a traditional student, didn't you talk about switching your major once or twice?
Yeah, well, I started out wanting to be a clinical psychologist and realized I'm kind of an empath, so that wasn't going to be really a good career for me. So then I bounced around a lot, and I tell Pam all the time, you don't necessarily think you're going to be in online learning. We didn't even know what that was back in 1998,
Yeah.
So, I would come to school, take different classes, talk to different faculty, listen to my peers, and I ended up finding myself, even though it changed a couple different times, I found my place.
Yeah, and you do. Even as big as Wichita State University is, you find your place, you find your people. And, I think for me, as having our offices here in Grace Wilkie Annex, we create that place where you can find your people. And that's what draws a lot of our students in. While you and I didn't have that experience, and you said something that really resonated with me. You didn't know what online learning was when you were taking your class, because there wasn't even really much of a thing then. I wanted to be a writer, and I wound up now the Associate Director of Online and Adult Learning. Well, by the time when I graduated in 2002, we may have had the Office of Online Learning, but I know we didn't have the Office of Adult Learning. And so my position wasn't even thought of. I wouldn't even know it was something that I could do.
It was unheard of.
Yeah. And you were the same, right?
Yeah, we were going in different directions.
Yeah. But it's kind of funny how, we've been brought together, and while we see our similarities and our differences, I think we connect well with our students, who a lot of our students are like us, maybe first gen. I think for adult learners, it's almost about 75% of our student population doesn't have that those family members with a college degree. And so that's where I think we like to step in and say, you know what, we'll be your family members. We'll show you the ropes. We'll show you. I know you've said this before. I
Absolutely.
don't want to put words in your mouth, but we've made mistakes, right?
I have made a ton of mistakes in higher education just because I didn't have anybody to lean on or guide me.
Or ask the questions too.
Correct.
Right.
And I would come here, park on campus, I would go to my class, and then after class, I would go back to work. So, and because I didn't know I didn't know the resources that were available on campus, I ended up taking too many classes. It was really expensive. And so, anytime, and I didn't know the terminology, I didn't know the colloquialisms, and people will just ramble things off really fast at college, and I wouldn't understand, and I'd feel like the odd man out because I didn't really connect with what they were saying. So I ended up making a couple mistakes, on my educational journey, and so now that has really sharpened me to be a good advocate for our students, because I know the traps that you can fall into, the things you may not understand, the things that you miss.
And something that you said about resources, I always tell our students, we are a resource-rich university, and we are. That being said, it's hard to know what your resources are, especially if you're an adult learner.
College to college.
If you're busy, you're working 9 to 5, 8 to 5, or whatever you're doing, you don't have time to dig around to see what those resources are. And that's why I'm here, and I think you kind of feel the same. That's why you are here as well, as to let you know what resources are available. Yes. And I think that's
because we know the things that adult learners struggle with: time management, time crunch. They don't have a lot of extra time, and so we're very good at listening to what you're going through, because it looks different for every student, and then being able to summarize that and figure out which resources on campus are best for you. So
point you in the right direction.
There are no dumb questions.
Right. Yeah.
Because I know I always felt like I was asking dumb questions. I often didn't ask them.
Right. Yeah.
Which is why I made mistakes.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I've had adult learners come in our office and ask me, and you can tell they're embarrassed, and they're kind of they'll admit it sometimes and say, well, what is Blackboard? How do I get on? What is Blackboard?
What is a learning platform?
How
do I do this?
Yeah, and even because I've been here. Well, like I said, I started in I don't know if I did say that, but I started in 2002 as a student. I was 31 years old. I've been on campus ever since. Wichita State kind of drew me in, and now I don't want to leave. And
now they can't get rid of us.
They try now. But yeah, so there were these questions, that I should have asked that I didn't ask. But I want to be that place or that person, and I know, Amber, you do too, where you can either email one of us or call us, come into the office,
come to our webinars, or
hey, what is a
Blue Book?
Yeah, what's a Blue Book?
What is Blackboard?
What is a credit hour? What can I do?
What are all these fees?
Yes.
How do I download this book?
And
for my class.
Here's the thing: I know I don't know all the answers.
Absolutely.
But we have friends, don't we?
Yes.
We have friends all over, and I'm hoping to bring some of those on the podcast, in the next couple of episodes, to talk about what they can do and what they do to help our students.
Yes. So they're specifically tailored for the adult learners. So we'll do that. We'll bring in resources. We'll bring in a lot of fun people to help you guys out. But we're also going to bring in students that are adult learners, possibly online or coming to campus, to talk about their experiences and talk about why they started and what the struggle is and who helped them, how they hung in there. And we might also bring in some alumni to talk about after the graduating, and what they're doing now in their career.
And so
post-graduation.
We'll give you contact information at the end of the show, but boy, we'd love to hear from you, to hear what you want to hear,
Yes.
Because we'll try to make it happen for you and see what else we can bring in. But I kind of want to go back a little bit.
Oh yeah, we didn't really talk about our background here at
Yeah.
We said they can't get rid of us. And that's because we did our BA.
Right. I did mine was a BA and an MA. and finally we had the same doctoral program.
We did, actually.
Yeah.
That was not planned.
No, I didn't even know you were in the same doctoral program until I was about halfway through with mine. But my degrees were in communication and English literature. That was my undergrad. And my master's was in communication. And then I got my doctorate in educational leadership. And what were your bachelor's and master's in?
My bachelor's was in psychology because I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, and it quickly changed my mind on that and came back for my MA in sociology because they worked with more like quantitative types of data, and I thought that, oh well, I'll get my MA and just work with data in an office somewhere, and that'll be good enough, right? Like we came to college thinking, okay, if I'm good enough to get through this class, I'm going to take more. Or if I'm good enough to get through this semester, maybe we'll do another semester. Maybe we'll graduate, right?
Yeah. I think I've told you before, that's exactly what I did. I took that first college class to even see if I was good enough to retain the information, and just kind of took it one class at a time until I finally realized, when I got my doctorate, maybe I was smart enough to get that degree.
But here's the deal: is like you and I came from a place where we didn't see it in ourselves. We just showed up. We showed up to class, and I would sit in the front because I'm a nerd.
Me too. Yeah.
But I would just show up, and somebody always ended up believing in me when I didn't know it myself.
And I think that's what happened. I know that's what happened to me. Is I found somebody who believed in me more than I believed in myself.
Yes.
And I think that happens to a lot of our students, and that's what we're here for too, because we'll be that kind of person. But Amber, you touched on something really important. We were talking about our backgrounds and what classes we took and everything. And although you didn't end up being a clinical psychologist, in my mind, and I've never said that, we haven't talked about this before, but I feel like you draw from that sometimes in your job, because I know I draw from my communication background. So, even though we didn't really know, I think we both had
our ideas.
But we couldn't have. There's no way we could have known where would we be today.
Well, yes, and then you told me that the job market had changed,
right?
And that threw you for a loop. So you had to change.
Right, because I wanted to write for a newspaper. That's all I'd ever wanted. I mean, you'd see little 10-year-old Pam reading the Wichita Eagle at the time.
Yeah.
And wanting to be like a columnist. And I certainly enjoyed that. And though when I graduated in 2007, every newspaper across the United States was laying people off. And while I can laugh at it that now, it certainly didn't feel good at the time, but I had one of those professors who believed in me and said, hey, why don't you get your master's? Yeah. And I kind of thought, oh, am I smart enough to get my master's even? And so talk about a little bit about your journey too.
That's actually interesting that you said, that the market had changed and your dream was kind of instantly changed. I think that Wichita State is really good at always evolving.
Yes.
Because as that economic shift happened, the college shifted as well for different job markets and job skills. So
they'll prepare you for almost anything.
Right.
And I think they're really good at that.
Which just brings me back to, if you show up.
Yes. Sitting in the front, ask the question.
Show up.
Yeah, just show up.
Wichita State's going to take you where you need to go. It did for me. I certainly didn't understand how higher education worked, and I did get my PhD. I kept coming back because somebody said, hey, you can do this. And I thought, oh, wow.
Well, and then, what? It's so fun to do this? And then we get to meet other people just like ourselves.
Sure.
And that's where you and I, we may be 10 years apart in age, but we work together really well. We had different backgrounds, but we still have a lot of shared commonalities and, just our jobs in general. And I think the one thing that unites us and our offices is this wanting to serve our students and
we want to advocate.
I always advocate, and I had people who helped me, and this is my way of giving back.
Yes.
And I get to have fun, some mornings.
No, it is fun.
Yeah, I get excited because I get to come to work and see the people that I love and make connections with students that I never dreamed I'd be able to. And
Sure.
so I think that's what we want to do.
It's easy to identify with our students because they have hearts of gold and they're working and they're trying to better their lives, and sometimes they don't have a good semester, and it's very easy for me to connect with that because I had some bad semesters too,
Yeah,
right?
right,
I had some
yeah.
good ones and I had some
Right.
bad ones. I had semesters where I had to take some time off.
Uh-huh.
But seeing myself in all of our students is something I love, and I love to help.
That's huge. Yeah, I talk about one of our students whose parents immigrated from Mexico, and he had a rough growing up period, doing so. And you would think this little girl who grew up on a farm, in rural Kansas couldn't connect with
Sure.
someone, but we sure did, and we still stay in touch to this day. He graduated 3 or 4 years ago, and so I think there's a unity we find with
Yeah.
our students, and it's so fun, and that's one of the reasons we're doing this. Is a big reason why we're doing the podcast, is to be able to tell those stories because they're unbelievable.
They really are unbelievable. They're really good. So that's why I said we're going to pull in a lot of students because Wichita State believed in me.
Yes.
Wichita State believed in us.
Right.
We believe in you.
Yeah.
So basically, we just want to be here for you and learn ways to advocate for you. And we want you to share tips and tricks that worked for you
Yes, please.
and things that didn't work for you. Right?
Yeah, right. So I know we've talked
We'll
about
talk
this.
about some fails,
Yeah.
right?
So I think one of the things that I learned, and you talked about study groups, and that really helped for you.
It did.
For me, study groups, I would get confused, and I would take somebody's question and I would almost take that as the answer, and I would go in and take a test if I had been in a study group and not do as well.
Right.
But I learned that about myself. So,
Yes. Where they kept me on track.
Yeah.
So, and it was kind of my only connection outside of the course is that I linked up with my peers and my cohort, and
Right.
I'm still best friends with a lot of my cohorts. So are you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Very good friends with people in my cohort.
Forever.
And, here's another thing for adult learners. I was able to connect with my professors because we were about the same age. And I have friends now that I have a professor here on campus. I took her class in 2003, so here 20 years later, guess who's one of my best friends on campus? It's really unique, but it's fun, and she was someone that I connected with because I saw her in myself. She came from that working class. Didn't grow up on a farm. Rather, like I believe her father. I know she came from Pennsylvania, and her father worked at. The things they do in Pennsylvania, like the steel
Right,
mills or
totally.
whatever they're doing down there. But we connected on that level, and so you can always find, I think, someone at Wichita State to connect with. And
that's us. We want
Yes.
to connect with you guys.
Yeah. So do you have any tips or anything else that you want to share with our audience before we...
I was thinking that obviously I keep saying to show up, but
Right.
I didn't come into higher education with knowing the terminology and knowing how it went or the resources, but I kept showing up because I was stubborn and annoying. And I would show up and sit in the front, ask questions. I would make friends with my peers. And if you do that, the university will take you in, and there's no way you can't.
You're going to, one thing that, that I've heard, and I think this is where you're going with that, you're not going to grow.
Right.
It's
impossible.
impossible. Yes.
Jinx.
Yes.
Drink a Coke. We are so old.
We are.
Jinxing.
But,
You owe me a Coke.
that's so true, though.
Right, because you're sitting there talking to your peers.
Right.
Opportunities are falling into your lap. Like,
Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily going to be a graduate student assissant.
I
I didn't
hadn't-
know that existed.
Right, yeah.
I didn't know there was...
Graduate student, and I thought a graduate student, here's another terminology, a graduate student was somebody that graduated, and
Right, okay.
And no, so a graduate student is actually someone here at Wichita State who is in a master's or doctoral program that's already completed their bachelor's. And so there's all these things. If something doesn't make sense to you, I hope that you reach out to one of us and ask.
Right. So,
Yeah. Is there anything
in
else?
closing,
Yeah.
these are the things that we're going to randomly blurt out and talk to you guys about
Yeah.
through the next upcoming episodes.
And we will do a lot of, that's how I feel like you and I really connect. We just kind of jump in on each other's
We sure
sentences
do.
and we blurt something out, and that will make, I'm going like, oh, I got to remember to tell her this. So it won't be boring, I can tell you that. I hope you'll get to laugh. Maybe even like me, I cried a little bit. Thanks, college algebra.
Oh yeah. So we often do webinars talking about some of the fears that adult learners have for coming back to school, and we unpack why that's such a block and how it really shouldn't be, and a lot of time management things, a lot of math tutoring, because a lot of our students have not been in math since high school and they're coming back, and that's a fear.
Right.
So, I basically follow us and show up to our next podcast.
We hope you enjoyed listening to episode 1 of our podcast. If you want to contact us, go to our website at www.wichita.edu/learningoutloud. As always, keep learning out loud.